Thank you, Madam Vice President. We welcome the rapporteur's report and his opening remarks. Cambodia is in the midst of yet another ruling party-created crisis. In the July 28 national elections, the Cambodian People's Party, in power since 1979, controlled and used in a partisan manner all official election-related bodies. This included the National Election Committee and the Constitutional Council, both of which failed to address credible allegations of voter fraud and other irregularities. As a result, the Cambodian people have yet again been deprived of a free and fair election. Government attempts to block peaceful demonstrations demanding an independent investigation into election irregularities have ended in unnecessary or excessive use of force against protesters and bystanders. Without an independent investigation, the opposition is refusing to take up seats in the National Assembly. Meanwhile, the government continues to commit serious human rights violations throughout the country. National and local authorities collude with land-grabbing investors, dispossessing the poor and trampling on their rights. On top of this, land rights protesters are threatened with arrest or violence. Intimidation and criminal prosecutions against defenders and political activists have also become commonplace. The Khmer language media is almost completely controlled by the ruling party. The government has made no progress in addressing impunity that has characterized the administration of Prime Minister Hun Sen over his 28 years in power. Today, the Supreme Court has reheard the case against Bon Sam Nang and Sop Simon, two men who were wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for the 2004 murder of Labour leader Chea Vichea. The charges should be dropped against them, and the world awaits the verdict. We call on the Human Rights Council to continue its scrutiny of Cambodia's precarious and worrying human rights situation and renew the Special Rapporteur's mandate for 2 years. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor next to the International Federation for Human Rights Leagues.
Madam Vice President, Mr. Speaker, FIDH and its member organizations, Ad Hoc and Licado, are deeply concerned about the ongoing, serious and systematic violations of land and housing rights, the intimidation and harassment of Cambodian human rights defenders, and the stifling of independent voices. Land grabbing and illegal forced evictions continue unabated. Evictions are carried out without due process, and those who protest are targeted by the authorities. Land rights activist Yon Bopha, who was pivotal in the protests of the Bangkok Lake community in Phnom Penh, was convicted on trumped-up charges. September 4th marked the first anniversary of her detention. Human rights defenders, NGO workers, activists and journalists continue to be subjected to threats, intimidation and harassment. Peaceful protesters face intimidation and violence. The lack of an independent judiciary makes it possible for the authorities to target independent voices and critics, and impunity is widespread. There are still no suspects for the murders of environmental activist Chut Wuti and of journalist Hang Sere Udom. Mr. Special Rapporteur, your successive reports highlighted the systematic nature of human rights violations in Cambodia, and your last report stressed the very poor performance of the Cambodian government in promoting and protecting human rights. With regard to electoral reform, none of your recommendations has been implemented, leading to contested election results. The authorities have used excessive lethal force to suppress the last series of protests by opposition supporters, and no later than 3 days ago, law enforcement officials looked on as thugs attacked a group of protesters, reporters and photographers. Given the situation on the ground and disturbing developments such as blatant lack of cooperation by the government, who even launched a smear campaign against you, Mr. Special Rapporteur, the Human Rights Council should adopt a strong resolution reflecting the issues, concerns and lack of progress you identified. We call on the Council to renew your mandate for a period of at least 2 years. I thank you.
I thank you. I give the floor next to International Catholic Bureau.
Madam Vice President, Special Rapporteur, in Cambodia, serious human rights abuses continue to be perpetrated, including forced evictions and attacks against civilians and activists. Last year, Human Rights Now conducted a fact-finding mission to investigate the land grabbings in Kratchie, Bangkok Lake and Borei Kela in Phnom Penh. We found forced evictions in the 3 cases. There were no legal grounds and these constituted violations of land rights. Although the government declared a moratorium of economic land concessions, these land concessions continue to be authorized in 2013, and most farmers still do not have land titles. Throughout 2012, the arbitrary arrest, detention, and prosecution against human rights defenders acting on land rights issues are perpetrated by the government, including the detention and prosecution of the radio owner Monsonando, imprisonment of 2 female housing activists, Tin Sakmoni and Yon Bopa. Ms. Bopa has been in jail for over 1 year now. We also witnessed the police and military use violence against civilians, resulting in the killing of a 14-year-old girl in Karachi last year and of a young man in the course of the post-election protests this month. These violations have been normalized in Cambodia. We express grave concern over the human rights situation and request the Council to extend the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. We urge the Council to closely monitor the situation and strongly urge the Cambodian government to end violence against civilians, to enforce evictions and attacks against human rights activists. Thank you.
That was the speaker from Human Rights. Now I give the floor next to the distinguished representative from Amnesty International.
Madam Vice President, Amnesty International is concerned with the deteriorating situation of human rights defenders in Cambodia and by the role of the justice system in restricting their work. As the Special Rapporteur highlights, quote, judges continue to use the provisions of the Criminal Code against human rights defenders, unquote. Housing rights activist Yon Bopa has been in prison since September 2012, convicted on spurious grounds after an unfair trial. The courts continue to allow impunity for perpetrators of human rights violations, including against human rights defenders Born Saman and Suk Sam Un, who remain imprisoned as scapegoats for the killing of union leader Chea Vichea in 2004, while the real killers have never been brought to justice. As the Special Rapporteur notes, there has been little progress in managing the land crisis, with economic land concessions and urban development leading to forced evictions and land disputes. Following Cambodia's recent national election, Cambodia's political future is unclear. We welcome the public commitments to implement human rights reforms made by both of the main political parties. Increasingly, Cambodians call vocally for changes, including a justice system that protects their rights. We recommend that the Special Rapporteur prioritize judicial reform, following the framework set out in his report to the 15th session of the Human Rights Council in 2010, and beginning with a call for the release of all those who have been convicted and imprisoned unfairly. The Special Rapporteur should also pursue with the government necessary reforms related to the land crisis, including ensuring the provision of legal remedy for those displaced. Amnesty International recommends that the Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of Cambodia and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Cambodia be extended for at least 2 years to allow the Office to continue its invaluable work in the promotion and protection of human rights and support for the Special Rapporteur's work. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor next to the Social Service Agency of the Protestant Church in Germany.
Madam Vice President, Special Rapporteur, LICADO welcomes your report and adds its voice to those who have urged the renewal of your mandate. There is a great deterioration in the human rights situation, and we are increasingly alarmed by the treatment of human rights defenders. Those who seek to assert their right in relation to land or labor issues, and those who support them, such as NGO staff and journalists, are at particular risk, facing violence, spurious legal action, intimidation, and even murder. It is commonplace for the authorities to deploy a range of methods, including gunfire, beating, and electric buttons, to disperse peaceful demonstration. Recently, undercover armed force shot dead a man and seriously injured at least 12 others as Crown attempted to return home following an opposition party-led post-election protest. This year, there have been at least 6 incidents of violence used against striking workers by police, private security firms, and employers, resulting in 41 injuries. This constant assault on protests render the right of the Cambodian people to freedom of expression and assembly increasingly vulnerable. We urge the Human Rights Council to extend its monitoring of Cambodia by requesting the special rapporteurs on the right to freedom of opinion and expression and peacefully assembly and association to conduct study on their respective issues in Cambodia. Those who perpetrate violent actions against human rights defenders are never punished. In June, a district governor was finally convicted of an intentional violence, having shot and wounded 3 gunmen factory workers during a protest. He has not served a single day of his sentence. Impunity needs to be urgently addressed. Mr. Special Rapporteur, we support your recommendations that human rights defenders should be allowed to carry out their work without intimidation and harassment, and your repeated recommendation to strengthen the independence and capacity of the judiciary. Further, we call on the Human Rights Council to urge the Cambodian government to conduct serious investigation into threat and attack against human rights defenders and to prosecute those responsible for human rights violation. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. I give the floor next to the World Association for the School as an Institute of Peace.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Professor Subedi was able to write 2 important points into his report on the electoral and judicial reform. The Khmer people are currently living in a state of poverty, corruption, land grabbing by force, perpetual violence, signs of a breach of human rights, the Constitution, and the Paris Peace Accords on Cambodia in 1991. The majority of the Cambodian people have expressed their desire for change. They clearly expressed their desire to get rid of the yoke of the same authoritarian government for the past 3 decades. On this occasion, an already flawed electoral system was compounded by a rigged election and manipulation of results. These frauds have angered the Khmer people, and this has resulted in huge demonstrations worldwide to demand justice. As the world has seen, the government responds with repressive measures, such as the use of armed security forces with the support of armored vehicles and guns to frighten the population. Despite the 300,000 petitions to implore the king to postpone the inauguration of the 5th legislature of the National Assembly, they were not allowed to present them until yesterday, September 23. The fact that the opening of the new National Assembly contravenes Article 76 of the Constitution of Cambodia and exacerbates the anger of the Khmer people is being rejected by its citizens. Madam Vice President, we urge the international community to take the revolt of the Khmer people seriously. The Khmer people received assurances from the international community through the Paris Peace Agreement on Cambodia to enjoy a multi-party democracy. In such a situation, Article 5.1 of the Paris Peace Accords on Cambodia states that a violation or threat of violation of any commitments in the agreement, the signatory countries to this instrument undertake to consult immediately with a view to adopting all appropriate steps. Article 5.4 calls upon the competent organs of the United Nations to take appropriate measures to put an end to these violations, to avoid killing of Cambodian civilians who demonstrate in a peaceful manner to demand justice from the recent election. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. I give the